Hello and welcome to Trojan Talk. I'm your host, Aaron Taylor. We'll be talking about an upcoming event with the Johnson Center for Political Economy, and my guest today, the Executive Director of the Johnson Center, Dr. Stephen Miller. Thanks for joining me here today.
Thanks for having me here, Aaron.
And let's talk a little bit about the Johnson Center in general first before we get into your special guest coming up, because some folks out there may not be familiar with the Johnson Center and what it means. Because I know, especially for some people in this area, there's two Johnson Centers that around here tied to the same family.
Yes.
But for the Johnson Center for Political Economy, tell us a little about what it is and what it does here at the university.
Right. So the Johnson Center for Political Economy was founded by Manly Johnson, an alumnus of Troy. Manly went on to get a PhD in economics from Florida State, and then he became an economics professor at George Mason University. He eventually ended up working in the Treasury Department and was the vice chairman of the Federal Reserve. So he's had a number of high-level positions, and he's also been a tremendous success in the private sector. So he believes very much in free market economics, and that economic freedom is essential to human flourishing. And so he started the Johnson Center. He was involved in the founding of the Johnson Center so that we could bring in economic researchers to both teach the economic way of thinking and good applied economic research, but also communicate the benefits of free markets to the public.
And so, and in that regard, you're bringing in a special guest to come speak here on campus to talk about some of those similar topics. Tell us about the special guest that you've got coming here.
Yes, so we're very excited. We have Walter Williams coming here to Troy University. Now, it turns out we've done some research. Over the past 30 years, Walter Williams has actually been to Troy twice before, but it has been probably 24 years since Walter Williams has been here. One of my predecessors in the Adams Bibby Chair for Free Enterprise actually brought Walter Williams out a couple of times in the 80s and then again in the early 90s. So we're excited. Walter Williams he's a widely read columnist. He has a nationally syndicated column. He frequently guest hosts on the Rush Limbaugh show about once a month or so. But he's just a very well-known popular writer, free market economist. He teaches at George Mason University, and he was actually my professor when I started in the PhD program there.
So coming full circle, bringing your professor to your new location to kind of talk about and share some of the ideals that he taught you back when you were in school. So I know it's got to probably make you feel good to have a little bit of this history coming back here to campus.
Yes, and frankly, the connection helps. It helps that he has some connection to Troy University, and it helps that myself and some of my colleagues have a connection to Walter as well.
And now, what makes him so popular? You talked about the fact that he's widely read and that he's appeared on Rush Limbaugh's show, which even if you don't listen to Rush Limbaugh, you know who he is.
That's right.
So what makes him so popular? What about his message that draws people to want to hear and what he has to say?
He is arguably the clearest and most passionate communicator of the economic way of thinking out there in the public right now. In terms of communicating economics to the public, it's hard to beat Walter Williams. But not only is he a very clear communicator and very talented when it comes to taking complex economic concepts and making them relatable to people, he's also an extremely committed free market economist. And he's one of the best examples, kind of an intellectual heir to Milton Friedman and F.A. Hayek and other economists of that stripe.
And why is it so important to make economics relatable? And I know this may be a simple question, but for someone like you, you know a lot about this theory, but for the layman, I guess it needs to be a way to kind of distill it to get the message across.
Yes. And unfortunately, what I'll say is we economics professors have probably done a lot of the damage ourselves. So what happens is a lot of people take economics in college, and they often say to me when they hear that I teach economics, "Oh, that was a very boring class," or I did not like that class. I didn't like what it taught me. And that's a shame because economics is extremely important. It is probably the best lens for understanding everyday life, certainly for understanding policy impact. When you think about the issues in the state budget in terms of the general fund shortfalls year after year, if you think about the problems in the federal government, it's very, very important to understand economics. So communicating it well, communicating in a dynamic way, and making people see how relevant economics actually is to their lives, not just to public policy, but even to their daily lives. Mm-hmm. That's a very important idea.
And of course, in relating the topics, but also maybe opening eyes to some new thoughts that they haven't had before, because obviously not everyone takes an economics class. So one would think that maybe an event like this might be able to open some eyes to some new ways of thought.
Right. Hopefully to get people to dig further afterwards, but even just attending a lecture like this is going to be extremely beneficial to people in terms of realizing there's a coherent way to see the world and understand policy and understand a lot of the things going around us, but you can't have that coherent view without some economic insights.
All right. Well, if anyone out there is interested in checking this out, when and where one more time?
So it's going to be on April 20th. Wednesday, April 20th at 10 a.m. in the Claudia Crosby Theater in Smith Hall.
All right. And any admission, cost for admission?
No, it's open to the public and it's free.
Open and free to the public. So, here's hoping that get a good turnout for this, sounds like enthusiastic speaker here on campus. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Harry.
And thank you for joining us on today's edition of Trojan Talk.